The night I walked into Hargrove's penthouse elevator, I told myself it would be the last time. I was 31 years old, behind 2 months on my rent, and so tired that the fluorescent lights in the hospital break room had started to feel like a personal attack. I'd been a pediatric nurse for 6 years. I was good at it, good enough that the families remembered my name, good enough that Dr. Osi had pulled me aside last spring and said I was the best triage nurse on the floor. None of that mattered to the billing department when the hospital merged with a larger system out of Dallas, and they quietly reclassified half the floor nurses from full-time to flexible scheduling, which was a very clean way of saying they could cut our hours, whenever they felt like it, without technically laying us off. So there I was, 31, skilled, exhausted, and about to be evicted from a 1-bedroom in Wicker Park that I'd spent 4 years making feel like home. My name is Saworsi. Most people can't pronounce it the first time. It's Sir Shah, Irish, my grandmother's name before mine. My mother thought it was romantic. My landlord, Mr. Baird, just called me the tenant in 4C on the eviction notice, which I appreciated for its efficiency if nothing else. I picked up a second job bartending at a place called the Cardinal on West Division. Nothing fancy. A low-lit neighborhood bar that got loud on weekends and quiet enough on Tuesdays that I could sometimes read between orders. The owner, a woman named Harriet, had hired me on a trial basis and told me she didn't want drama. I told her I didn't have time for drama. We got along fine. That's how I ended up pouring drinks for Calloway, not his first name. I didn't know his first name for a long time. To everyone in that bar, he was just Calloway. He came in on a Wednesday, which was already unusual because Wednesdays at the Cardinal were dead. He sat at the far end of the bar, away from the 2 regulars nursing their beers near the TV, and he ordered a neat scotch without looking at the menu. He wore a charcoal suit that hadn't come off any rack I'd ever seen, and he had the kind of stillness about him that made you want to lower your voice without knowing why. I set the glass in front of him and he looked up. I'd been looked at before, but not like that. It wasn't predatory. It was something more unsettling than that. It was the look of someone who was already calculating something, already deciding, already 3 steps ahead of a conversation that hadn't started yet. "Thank you," he said. "Sure," I said, and went back to wiping down the other end of the bar. He came back the following Wednesday, and the one after that. By the 4th week, Harriet had noticed. She pulled me into the back before my shift and said, very carefully, "Do you know who that man is?" I didn't. She told me his last name first, Calloway, and then after a pause that felt longer than it was, she told me his first name. Stellan Calloway. She said it the way you say a name you've heard too many times in contexts you didn't choose, with a kind of flat familiarity, like a weather pattern you've learned to read. "He's not someone you want to owe anything to," she said. "I'm not planning to owe him anything," I said. She gave me a look that said she'd heard that before, and went back to her office. I thought about what she said for about 45 minutes. Then Stellan came in, and when I set it down, he asked me what time I got off. "Late," I said. "I'll be here," he said. I almost laughed. "I'm not going anywhere with you." He looked at me with that same still expression. "I didn't ask you to go anywhere, I just said I'd be here." And he was. He stayed until Harriet flipped the sign at 1 a.m., finished 2 scotches total over 4 hours, tipped me $200, and left without another word. I stood there staring at the bills on the bar for a long moment. I thought about Mr. Baird's eviction notice. I thought about my mom in Naperville, who would offer to loan me money she didn't have if I called her. I thought about the 6 a.m. shift I had at the hospital the next morning, and how I'd be running on 4 hours of sleep. I put the money in my pocket and tried not to think about what it meant. The gifts started 3 weeks later. I want to be very clear about something. I am not a woman who is easily impressed by things. I grew up in a row house in Bridgeport, Southside Chicago, the daughter of a union electrician and a school secretary. We were not poor, but we were careful. We didn't waste. We fixed things instead of replacing them. I drove a 2014 Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper that I'd been meaning to get fixed for 2 years, and I felt zero shame about it. So when a box arrived at the Cardinal addressed to me, a box containing a cashmere coat, dark green, exactly my size, I did not immediately put it on and swoon. I stared at it for a solid 2 minutes, then I called Harriet in from the back. "Did you give someone my information?" I asked her. She looked at the box. She looked at me. No. Then how does he know my size? She didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. I didn't return the coat. I told myself it was because I didn't know where to send it back. That was partially true. The fuller truth was that it was November in Chicago, and I had been wearing the same pilled peacoat for 3 winters, and this one was warm in a way that felt almost unfair, like being forgiven for something you'd done wrong. But I kept the tags on. I want to be honest about that too. The next Wednesday, Stellan came in as usual. I was wearing the coat on my break, outside, in the cold because I was still deciding. He came around the side of the building to the alley where the staff smoked. I don't smoke, I just needed air. And he stopped when he saw me. It fits, he said. You need to stop sending me things, I said. Why? Because I don't know who you are. Because Harriet looks at you like you're a natural disaster. Because $200 for 2 scotches is not normal. And a cashmere coat sent to a bar where I work is. I stopped. I was saying too much. It's not okay. He leaned against the brick wall and looked at me without any trace of defensiveness. What would make it okay? Answering my question. Who are you? There was a pause. Not the pause of someone who doesn't know what to say, the pause of someone deciding how much to say. My name is Stellan Calloway, he said. I own several businesses in this city. Some of them you'll find in public records. Some of them you won't. I stared at him. That's not an answer. It's the answer I can give you right now. I went back inside. I left the coat on. I need to explain something about my life that fall, because it matters. My younger sister, Demi, was 26 and living in Logan Square with a roommate and a calico cat named Biscuit. She was a graphic designer, funny and sharp-tongued, and completely incapable of dating anyone who was good for her. She'd been seeing someone for the past year, a man named Paul, who made her laugh and also made her cry and who I had serious, specific reservations about. I'd met him twice, and both times he'd talked over her. Demi was the only person I told about Stellan. Not about who he might be, I still didn't fully know, but about the scotch, the tip, the coat. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Is he hot? Demi, I'm serious. Is he attractive? Because this story goes one way if he's attractive and a completely different way if he's not. That is not the relevant source, I sighed. Yes. He's yes. Objectively. She made a sound. Okay. Then here's my question. Are you afraid of him? I thought about that seriously because Demi deserved a serious answer. No, I said finally. I don't feel afraid around him. I feel. I paused, searching. Alert. That's either very good or very bad. I know. You're going to see him again. I work in the bar where he drinks every Wednesday, Demi. You know what I mean. I did know what she meant, and she was right. What I found out about Stellan Calloway, I found out in pieces. Some of it from Harriet, who disclosed things slowly and reluctantly, like she was paying for each word. Some of it from a conversation I overheard between 2 men at the bar who clearly thought I wasn't listening. Some of it Stellan told me himself in that same measured way he had. The way that made you feel like you were getting exactly as much as he had decided you could handle. He was 40, born in Chicago to a Croatian father and an Irish-American mother, which explained a name that sounded like 2 countries arguing. His father had built something. I got conflicting accounts of what, exactly, and then his father had died when Stellan was 23, and Stellan had inherited not just assets but obligations. That was the word people used when they talked about Calloway's world. Obligations. Not debts, not threats. Obligations. He controlled a significant piece of the city's waterfront development, legitimately, on paper, through a holding company called Meridian Group. What Meridian was an umbrella for was harder to pin down. I was not naive. I had grown up in this city. I knew the geography of how power worked here. The way it layered. Union halls and aldermen and men who never ran for anything but whose phone calls got returned on the first ring. Stellan occupied some version of that space. Old money that had gotten its hands dirty and never entirely washed them clean. Knowing this, I should have put more distance between us. Instead, one Thursday evening in December, I was walking out of a late hospital shift at 9 p.m., in the kind of cold that makes your teeth hurt, and his car was parked at the curb. Not waiting, or at least, he didn't make it feel like waiting. He was on the phone. He looked up when I came through the door and ended the call. Your car wouldn't start this morning, he said. I stopped walking. How do you know that? You took the blue line. You don't usually take the blue line. I stared at him. Are you watching me? I pay attention. He got out of the car, a dark gray Escalade, understated for someone of his apparent means, and opened the passenger door. It's 12 degrees. I'm fine. I know you're fine. Get in. There was no threat in it, just a certainty that I found, to my own frustration, more convincing than most people's pleading. I got in the car. The heat was already running. There was a coffee in the cup holder, the kind from the good place 3 blocks from the hospital, my usual order. I looked at the cup, then at him. You need to stop knowing things about me that I haven't told you, I said. He pulled into traffic. Then tell me things yourself. So I did, which is how the actual trouble started. We had dinner for the first time on a Friday in January. Not at his usual level. He picked a place in Pilsen that I'd been meaning to try, a Chilean spot with maybe 15 tables and a chalkboard menu. I was surprised by the choice. I think he intended for me to be surprised. I found out that night that he had a sister, Valentina, who lived in Prague and called him every Sunday, that he had not taken a vacation in 4 years, that he read, not the performative kind, and that his copy of Blood Meridian had so many underlined passages that I asked to see it, and he seemed genuinely caught off guard by the request, which felt like a minor victory. What I told him, that I'd almost quit nursing twice, that I still called my dad every Sunday, even though he'd been gone for 6 years, just out of habit, and sometimes I'd dial 3 digits before I caught myself, that I didn't know how much longer I could do the flexible scheduling limbo at the hospital before I'd have to make a decision I wasn't ready to make. He listened to all of it, not with the performed attentiveness of someone waiting for their turn to speak, actually listened. When I finished talking, he'd be quiet for a moment, and then ask a question that showed he'd been tracking the whole thing. I wasn't used to that. I didn't realize how unused to it I was until I was sitting across from him at that small table and feeling uncomfortably, inconveniently seen. Why a nurse? He asked, late into the dinner. Pediatric, specifically, I said. Kids don't have the right defenses yet. They need someone in their corner who isn't panicking. He was quiet for a moment. You like being the one who isn't panicking. It wasn't a question, but I answered it anyway. Yes, he looked at me in that way he had. So do I. We walked 4 blocks in the cold after dinner because neither of us was ready for the night to end. He didn't try to hold my hand. He didn't push anything. He just walked beside me, and we talked about the city, the lakefront in winter, the way certain neighborhoods were being hollowed out by money from the outside, and I thought dangerously, this is the most comfortable I have felt in a long time. When he dropped me off, he said, I'd like to see you again. I know, I said. Is that a yes? I looked at him for a second. Ask me again when you tell me something real about yourself. Not a business structure. Something real. He nodded, once, fair. He told me 3 days later, in a text message at 10 p.m. when I was coming off a 12-hour shift, my father was killed by his own brother over a disagreement about control of the business. I was the one who found out first. I was 22. I've been running this thing ever since because I didn't know how to stop. I read it twice. Then I called him. That's real, I said when he answered. Yes, he said. I'm sorry. A pause. Thank you. Ask me again, I said. He did. The problem with Stellan wasn't that he was difficult to like. The problem was that he was easy to like in exactly the wrong way, the way that made you start rearranging your expectations of what you were allowed to want. By February, I knew things about the nature of his work that I hadn't gone looking for. Some of it found me. A man approached me outside the hospital one afternoon, not threatening, careful to stay unthreatening, and told me I should think carefully about who I was spending time with. He gave me a business card. Chicago PD, Organized Crime Division. I called Stellan immediately. He picked up on the second ring. I know, he said before I could speak. How? They've been watching me for 2 years. They're not going to stop. His voice was level. Are you frightened? I'm angry, I said. There's a difference. I heard something shift in his tone, something almost like relief. Where are you? Hospital parking lot. Stay there. He was there in 20 minutes. We sat in his car in the lot while he told me, calmly and without apparent omission, what the federal and city interest in his operations actually looked like, what they were likely to be able to prove, what they weren't, what he was doing about it. He spoke about it the way I'd speak about a patient's chart. Clinical, precise, without self-pity. I asked him why he was telling me this. Because you asked me to be real, he said. This is real. Do you want to get out? I asked. Of all of it. A long pause. I don't know if I can. Some of it I'm working to clean up. Some of it runs deeper than I can pull out in a year or two. He looked at me. I want to be honest with you about that. Then be honest, I said. Don't just tell me what you think I want to hear and call it honesty. The honest answer, he said, is that I started this conversation about 3 months ago thinking you were something temporary, someone I was interested in. I don't think that anymore. I felt something close in my chest. What do you think now? He didn't answer immediately. He stared through the windshield at the gray February sky. I think I'm being careful about what I say because if I say it and it changes things between us, I don't know what I'd do with that. I understood that. I understood it too well. In March, Demi called me at 7 in the morning, which was never a good sign. She was crying. Paul had ended things. Or she had, depending on which version of the story she was telling. But the version that mattered was that she was in her apartment alone, and her roommate was out of town, and she needed me. I called in a favor from another nurse, covered the beginning of my shift, and went to Logan Square. I was there within the hour. I stayed the whole day. We watched terrible reality TV and ordered from the Thai place around the corner, and I let her talk about Paul until she'd said everything she had to say about him, and then we talked about other things. Stellan texted once, mid-afternoon. You okay? I texted back, my sister. She's okay, I'll explain later. He texted back a single word, okay. I showed it to Demi. She looked at the screen and then looked at me. Her eyes were still puffy from crying, but her expression was sharp. He texts like a man who knows how to give people room, she said. What does that mean? It means most people, when they're interested in someone and that person goes quiet, they get anxious and start filling the silence with themselves. He didn't do that. She handed me back my phone. I want to meet him, Demi. Not in a weird way. I just want to see the situation for myself. She met him 3 weeks later. At a dinner I organized with approximately 30% confidence it was a good idea. Stellan showed up with flowers for her, not for me, which I thought was either very calculated or very thoughtful. Probably both. Demi asked him, over pasta, what kind of businesses he ran. He said, some commercial real estate, some shipping contracts, some things I'm less proud of that I'm in the process of addressing. Demi blinked. That's a more honest answer than I expected. Your sister established a fairly strict standard for honesty early on, he said, and looked at me. I've been trying to meet it. Demi glanced at me across the table. I looked at my wine glass. After he left, she sat on my couch and said, okay. I see it. See what? Why you can't be normal about this. She tucked her feet under her. He treats you like you're the most interesting thing in the room and he's not even performing it. It's just how he is. That's not. I stopped. No. You're scared. I'm a person who understands risk. I work in a hospital. I know what happens when you don't account for variables. You also know what happens when you're so busy managing risk that you don't let anything actually happen. She looked at me steadily. Mom said the same thing about you after Dad died. You got so organized, so practical. You stopped letting yourself want things. I didn't answer. The thing about Demi is that she's 26, and she's not always right. But sometimes she is absolutely right, and she shows it. April. The hospital finally gave us the new scheduling terms, a modest but real improvement, enough that I could stop the second job at the Cardinal if I wanted to. I gave Harriet 2 weeks' notice on a Tuesday afternoon, and she hugged me and told me I was a good one, and not to get in over my head with things I couldn't get out of. I told her I'd be careful. That's not what I said, she told me. That night, Stellan and I had dinner at his apartment. Not a restaurant, his place, which I'd seen but never stayed long in. It was a penthouse on the Gold Coast, high up, with windows that turned the city into something abstract and glittering. He cooked pasta aglio e olio, which he made with the same precision he brought to everything, and I sat on the kitchen counter and watched him, and talked and thought about the fact that this was the most relaxed I had seen him look. After dinner we sat on the couch with the city spread out in front of us, and there was a long, comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who have stopped performing for each other. Tell me something you haven't told me yet, I said. He thought about it. I've been approached twice in the last year about going fully legitimate. Selling certain assets, exiting certain contracts. Both times I didn't take it. Why not? Because both times, the offer came from people who wanted to absorb what I was giving up, not dismantle it. The outcome wouldn't have been cleaner, just differently dirty. I considered that. And if a real path existed, then I'd take it. I believed him. I think that's the part I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. That somewhere in the last 4 months, I had started trusting Stellan Calloway, not because I was blind to what he was, but because I had tested it, the way I tested things, carefully, practically, paying attention to what matched and what didn't. And more things had matched than I expected. Stellan, I said. He looked at me. I'm not going to tell you I'm fine with everything. I'm not going to pretend I don't lie awake sometimes thinking about that detective and his business card. I can't promise you that doesn't scare me. I know, he said, but I'm also not going to pretend that I don't. I stopped. Started again. I'm not willing to keep pretending that this doesn't matter to me, that you don't matter to me. He was very still. I'm telling you this, I said, because you keep waiting for me to decide, and I think you've been waiting for a while, and I think it's fair for me to I looked at him, to just say it. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, with a kind of carefulness that undid me a little. You're telling me, he said quietly. I'm telling you. Then I'll tell you something too. His hand dropped to mine, and he held it. The first night I came into that bar, I sat at the end of the rail and watched you work, and I thought, that woman is tired in a very specific way. The kind of tired that comes from doing hard things well for a long time without enough acknowledgement. And I thought, he paused. I thought I'd like to know her. That's a lot to think in a bar. I think quickly. I laughed, and the tension in the room shifted into something warmer. What do you call me? I asked. In your head, when you think about me. He looked at me with something that wasn't quite a smile but was close. Ace, he said. Ace? You walk into a room and you've already assessed it. You know where the exits are. You know who's struggling. You're always 3 moves ahead. That's not what it means. It's what it means when I say it. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. We stayed like that for a long time. The city glittering below us, his hand in mine, the quiet between us that had stopped feeling empty and started feeling like the thing I hadn't known I was short of. It was a Tuesday in May when things cracked open. I had been at the hospital all day. Long shift, a hard one, a 7-year-old who came in after a car accident, hours of waiting on the parents' behalf while the surgical team worked. She made it. They always feel like a miracle and a relief at the same time. Those moments, and you walk out of the building afterward with your legs made of something heavier than bone. I drove to Stellan's building instead of home without entirely deciding to. I parked and texted him from the lobby. I'm downstairs. He came down himself, didn't ask questions, just looked at my face and said, "Come up." He made tea while I sat on the couch and said nothing, which is what I needed. The tea, and the silence and someone present who could tolerate both without requiring me to explain. Eventually, I told him about the little girl and the hours and the parents in the family waiting room, and he listened without flinching, which is not nothing. Some people flinch from the specific difficulty of medical work, the necessary intimacy with crisis. He didn't. You're very good at what you do, he said. I know, I said, which sounds arrogant but was just true, and he knew it was just true, which was why he'd said it. We sat quietly for a while longer. Then he said, in a different voice, I need to tell you something. I looked at him. There's going to be a development in the next few weeks that I can't fully control the public shape of. A deal I was involved in 2 years ago before. He stopped. Before things changed for me. The federal investigation is going to move on it. It will be in the news. My chest tightened. How bad? Not criminal for me directly, but associated. He held my gaze. I wanted you to hear it from me. I didn't want you to read about it. What kind of deal? He told me. It took about 10 minutes to lay out fully, and none of it was comfortable to hear. But all of it tracked with things I'd already half known. The shape of it, the geography. He wasn't confessing to me like someone seeking absolution. He was informing me because I had earned the information, and because he understood that I would make better decisions with it than without it. When he finished, I said, Thank you for telling me. I know it complicates things. Everything about you complicates things. I looked at him. I'm not leaving. He let out a breath that told me he'd been holding it. But I need you to understand something, I said. I'm not in this because I think I can fix you or save you or turn you into something else. I know what you are. I'm in this because you're honest with me and you listen and you show up and that. I shook my head. That's actually quite rare, Stellan. You'd be surprised. He looked at me for a long moment. Ace, what? I was going to wait until I'd cleaned more of this up before I said this. I had a plan about it. I raised my eyebrows. And you just told me you're not leaving, and I think that might have collapsed the timeline on my plan. Despite everything, the heaviness of the day, the weight of what he'd just told me, I felt something warm work its way through my chest. Say it then. He reached over and took my hand again. His thumb moved across my knuckles, once. I love you, he said. I've been working up to saying it correctly for about 3 months. I've decided to just say it plainly. I looked at him. You can take your time, he said. I'm not. I love you too, I said. I've known it since February, and I've been very professionally managing not to say it. He actually laughed. A real one, surprised out of him. I'd heard that laugh before, but not often, and each time it happened I felt like I'd won something small and worth winning. That was 8 months ago. I am not going to tell you everything is resolved. I am not someone who wraps things in a bow. The federal situation made the news in June, as he said it would. 3 days on page 4 of the Tribune, a sidebar in a longer piece about waterfront development. Stellan's name appeared once, in a list, not prominently. He had been right about the exposure. I still don't love that it exists. He's working with an attorney I've never met, but have decided to trust because Stellan trusts him, and the attorney has apparently been untangling certain things. It's slow. It requires patience that I have professionally, but not always personally. Demi met him 4 more times, and on the 5th time she asked him to help her find a better apartment, which he did, without making a production of it. She texted me afterward. Okay, he's good. High praise from Demi. My car got fixed. Stellan did not pay for it. I made that very clear. But he did know someone who could do it on a Sunday at a fair price, which felt like the right balance between his world and mine. He still calls me Ace. I've stopped objecting. Last Sunday, I was at his place when his sister Valentina called from Prague. He put her on speaker after the first few minutes without asking if that was okay. And she talked to both of us for 45 minutes about her city and her work, and a neighbor whose dog kept getting into her terrace garden. I'd never met her. I told her the terrace garden problem sounded like a dispute worth having, and she laughed and said she liked me. When he hung up, Stellan looked at me for a moment. He didn't say anything, but I knew what the look meant. I knew it because I'd stopped needing him to say everything out loud. I'd started trusting myself to read him, the pauses, the choices, the specific and considered way he occupied the space between us. I am 31 years old. I am tired in the specific way that comes from doing hard things well. I am, for the first time in a long time, not tired in the other way, the hollow kind, the way you get when you've been practical for so long. You forgot what it felt like to want something without immediately cataloging why you probably shouldn't. I still don't know exactly what the next year looks like. Neither does he. But he told me last week that one of the waterfront contracts is being restructured into something that would hold up under daylight. And he said it the way someone says something they've been working toward for a long time. Quietly, like they don't want to jinx it. I told him it sounded like progress. He said, slowly. I said, slowly is fine. Slowly means it's real. He looked at me the way he looked at me that first night across the bar, calculated, deciding 3 steps ahead, and then past that, the way he looks at me now, which is different. The way you look at something you've already decided to keep,